While not necessary, removal of the radiators makes accessing the cylinder head much easier. Remove any hose clamps and hoses that interfere with the removal of the radiators. Using a pair of needle nose pliers as shown, use a twisting motion to remove the hoses from the spigots. When removing the rad protectors, keep in mind there is a left and right side protector. Next, remove the radiator mount bolts. Now you should have easier access to the crossover tube. Use the same methods to remove both radiator sides. The exhaust header will also need to be removed. It's a good idea to soak these fasteners in penetrating oil before removal. If the bike's ignition coil is going to be in the way, remove it. Make note of the ground eyelet on the top fastener. When removing the spade connector, be sure to pull on the connector and not the wire. To make pulling the cylinder head easier, remove any bolt-on water spigots. Carefully wiggle the spigot until it's free and keep track of any O-rings. Next, remove any upper engine mounts. These mounts vary from model to model. Keep track of any fasteners, washers, and spacers and their location. Now remove any of the smaller cylinder head fasteners. Use a crisscross pattern in 2 or 3 stages when removing the cylinder head nuts. A stage means 2 or 3 turns per nut until the nut is loose. Installing a rag down the cam chain hole or using a magnet will prevent anything from falling into the bottom end of the engine. Using a side-to-side motion or a few taps from a plastic hammer should allow you to pull the cylinder head. Never use any pry tools. It could damage the cylinder seating surface. Keep track of any dowels and remove any gaskets. Inspect the head for any cracks or damage. Use a valve compression tool to remove the valves. Only compress the valve spring enough to allow the keepers to fall out or be removed. You may require a small tap of the hammer to unseat the keepers. Intake and exhaust valve components are not interchangeable. Be sure to keep each valve and its parts separate. Remove the keepers, retainer, and spring and inspect for wear or cracks. Remove the valve and check for damage, stem wear, or carbon buildup. Also, check the valve face for damage, cupping, or carbon buildup. This is an example of a good usable valve. Also, remove the spring seat. Check for wear or cracking. Ceramic bead blasting is recommended to remove the carbon deposits. If necessary, you can use a Scotch-Brite pad to clean the combustion chamber and valve seats. Be sure to wash and dry the head thoroughly after cleaning. Change the valve guide seals anytime the valves are removed. The intake and exhaust guide seals are not interchangeable. Lube the valves with oil and use a twisting motion when installing. Install the seat, spring, and retainer and then compress. Again, only compress far enough to get the keepers in. Only new keepers should be installed. Use grease to keep them in place on the valve. Be sure the keeper protrusion sits in the valve indent. Hold the keepers in place while slowly relieving the spring tension. Remove any excess grease and be sure to compress the valve a few times to seat the keepers. Use a piece of mechanics wire or a magnet to lower the cam chain to make installation of the head easier. Install a new head gasket. Make sure you have all locating dowels installed and reinstall the head. You'll also need to make sure your cam chain guides are located properly. Don't use excessive force when installing the head. Double check that everything's lined up correctly before seating the dowels with a plastic hammer. Now install the head washers and nuts. Gradually tighten in a crisscross pattern in 2 or 3 steps before finally torquing to specification. This is very important to use the proper torque spec for each different model. Now tighten and torque any other cylinder head fasteners. Reinstall and torque the upper engine mount. Reinstall any removed water spigots. Be sure to use a new O-ring. If you remove the coil, reinstall and double check any connectors. Any poor contacts will cause ignition problems. Grease a new exhaust gasket and loosely install the header. Alternate tightening the upper and lower fastener until the final torque is reached. Reinstall radiators and hoses and make sure to check all hose clamps for tightness. Be sure to check for leaks on initial startup.